Hello guys and welcome back. Today we start a brand new project. We take this M1117 Guardian from Trumpeter and turn it into a custom Ukrainian APC by adding some self-made drone protection on it. We begin with the wheels. They consist of several parts layered on top of each other to create a very nice detailed structure. On the inner side, we attach the connections to the axle and the steering rod. The suspension systems of wheeled vehicles always seem to be somewhat more complex in their construction than one initially imagines. The somewhat questionable aspect of this is that some of the parts are movable and do not have a fixed position. If we had a fully articulated suspension system here, that would certainly be necessary, but aside from the steering, nothing here is movable. So why then do these parts need to be movable? However, with a little patience and a close look at the instructions, everything can be assembled, and once put together, it holds together surprisingly stably. Only these two rods here gave me a bit of a headache. I really struggled to tell from the instructions which way around they were supposed to be attached. Fortunately, the rim goes on right after them. However, you have to look very closely here to see which parts attach to the connector piece from above and which attach from below. It looks reasonably straight and symmetrical though, I would say. Enough about the suspension. Now I will turn my attention to the turret. I will start with the weapon system. The Guardian features two coaxial weapons, a 40mm Mk19 grenade launcher and an M2 Browning machine gun. Although both barrels are made entirely of plastic, they are nonetheless beautifully detailed thanks to slide molding and feature open muzzles. And make sure that both weapons are parallel so it doesn't look odd in the end. The entire assembly can be installed into the turret now. Since we are not supposed to use any glue here, the whole unit remains movable along the vertical axis, but more on that later. Now the upper half of the turret is put in place, and the fit is very nice here. What is truly interesting is that the entire turret is now being fitted with the actual outer armor plating. This is definitely an interesting solution for capturing fine details from every angle while still utilizing injection molding. All the plates fit into only one specific spot thanks to corresponding cutouts. I finally sanded down the edges of all the plates to achieve nice straight edges. I'm leaving the hatch in the turret closed, as I currently do not have a suitable figure for it. The mounts for the angled mirrors are now being placed all around the turret. I will leave the clear parts off for now and glue them in after painting. This is the ammunition belt for the grenade launcher. And that is why the weapon's vertical mobility is irrelevant, since the position is fixed by this part anyway. While there is a somewhat flexible rubber alternative included, the addition of this armor plate means that really only the standard alignment is possible here as well. It's a shame really. Now even the beautifully detailed ammunition belt has completely disappeared. Next up are a few photo etched parts. Using my tweezers, I can bend this box for the forward periscope and then glue it in place with a bit of super glue. And what really surprised me was the inclusion of photo etched parts for the suspension. It's a nice detail, of course, but I rather doubt you will be able to see any of it later on, especially if the suspension ends up caked in mud. For such a seemingly simple component, the smoke discharger's assembly was actually quite tedious to align correctly. But it's nice that there is a small photo etch part included here as well to further enhance it. The turret is finished, so let's move on to the vehicle itself. First we need to join the two halves together. To do this, I'm gluing the whole thing together in small sections to ensure a proper alignment. The roof also fits into the recess without any problems. Just like the turret, the entire hull is fitted with additional plates. During assembly there will be some gaps. However, this is no cause for concern, as other parts will be inserted there later. Nevertheless, the order in which the plates are attached is critical in some areas, as they overlap at some of the corners. Many of the horizontal plates feature an anti-slip texture, which is definitely a nice detail to further enhance the otherwise bare metal plates. I also leave the hatches for the driver and co-driver closed. And these are the parts for which we had to leave small gap between the plates. The clear parts are glued from the inside into the additional panel for the driver's cap, which is why I cannot omit them. Therefore, I will need to protect these clear parts with masking fluid later on before applying the paint. The ventilation grill for the engine is available both as a plastic part and a photo etched part. The photo etched part of course looks significantly better in my opinion. These will be the headlights. The Guardian has a great many hatches and doors. There is something on literally every side. However, since there is no interior whatsoever, I will depict everything in the closed position. This side door features a double glazed window. However, I doubt that one would actually be able to see anything through it later on, given the dark interior. Therefore I am gluing the inner pane in now, while the outer one will be installed once I have finished painting everything. Next come a host of smaller details, such as handles, more additional plates, the steps beneath the side doors and more. Despite the sheer number of small parts, everything has a secure and easily identifiable place, as they are corresponding recesses for just about everything. And now I have to deal with a few photo etched parts again. Each wheel well features 4 riveted panels that I now need to glue into place. Unfortunately, however, the instructions got things a bit mixed up here. The part numbers for the smaller panels are swapped, so they don't fit correctly. One leaves too much space, while the other leaves too little. It was a bit annoying, but I was able to remove the parts and then reposition them in the right spots. Now another door is added to the rear, along with the exhaust grille and the trailer hitch. Mounts for 2 canisters are attached to the left side. Each canister consists of 4 parts plus the actual mounting bracket. I had to think for a moment about what this hole was supposed to represent. However, it appears that a towing winch, complete with the corresponding chain and cable, is located behind here. These are the tail lights, and I don't think they could have designed this any more fragilely. I really had to be careful not to break anything here, and once again, this was a spot where the instructions really could have gone into a bit more detail. As it stands, the whole thing looks a bit crooked on my model. Here at the front are the fuel caps, once again featuring a nice little photo-etched parts for detail. The 2 axles can now finally be attached as well. As usual, each part really only fits in one specific spot, and as soon as everything is seated correctly, you can tell immediately, since the whole assembly feels remarkably sturdy once again. Next, there were a few rods and other details to attach for the steering mechanism. Honestly, I'm not sure if all the parts here are placed exactly as they should be, but fortunately a large plate attaches from the front that hides the whole chaos anyway. And this here is the Guardian exactly as you find it in the box. But since you have already seen the thumbnail, you know that we aren't finished here yet. I'm going to build a Guardian as you would currently find it in Ukraine. To do this, I will use plastic profiles and metal mesh to construct the distinctive improvised anti-drone armor. I measured the length and drew a few sketches for the individual parts. Afterwards, I cut the plastic profiles to the appropriate length using my hobby knife. For gluing, I can use standard Tamiya plastic cement, which spares me the tedious work of using super glue, at least for now. Here too I used the template to help me align the parts that don't form a simple 90-degree angle. As for the rods, I used round profiles and cut them to a length that looked realistic and sensible to me. It turned out to be quite a bit harder than I expected when it came to the slightly more complicated shapes. Fortunately, in reality the whole thing is improvised anyway, so it's not such a big deal if some of the corners look a bit rough. Wherever I join 2 grids together at an angle, I reinforce the connection further using additional round profiles. At first, I intended to draw up a nice plan, but quickly realized that it was actually simpler to pick out specific spots and just experiment to see what would fit where. Now that I have the frames, I still need to find a sensible way to attach them to the vehicle. To do this, I'm using these hollow round profiles. Purely by chance, my rods actually fit into them perfectly. I'm going to cut off some short sections now and use them as a kind of connector. I can securely attach the hollow round profile to the vehicle while still retaining the option to remove the frame later. And it actually adhered significantly better than expected, as a good connection was established very quickly despite the small contact surface. To find the correct position, I placed the frame in the right spot and then marked the points where the rods touched the vehicle with a pen. Afterward, I can glue the connectors onto my marked points, and in the end, everything should fit together. Additionally, I used the hollow profiles at the points where the rods connect to the rest of the frame. Not only does this make the connection slightly more sturdy, but I also think it looks a bit more realistic. For the larger frames, I can additionally reinforce the corners with cross braces. These frames actually look pretty good as they stand, but don't really help against drones yet. So now I'm attaching the actual wire mesh. I mark out the rough dimensions and then cut it to size. Next, I apply a generous amount of superglue, spreading it all over the frame. Now I can carefully place the mesh in position, hopefully ensuring enough contact points to secure it. I can further strengthen the connection with additional superglue. Once the glue is dry and everything is in place, I can cut away the excess mesh using a sturdy pair of scissors. It looks pretty good so far, I'd say. I've definitely only glued my fingers together about 20 times. So far, the turret is only protected from above. If I seal off the sides with more wire mesh, no one will be able to get out anymore. That is why I'm going to build a chain curtain now. To do this, I cut a very fine jewelry chain into small pieces of roughly equal length. Incidentally, I recommend using an old pair of cutters for this, as you can easily ruin the blades on such more thick metal. I don't want to attach the chains directly to the frame, but rather to a piece of wire first, essentially like a proper curtain rod. Now I thread the small chains onto the piece of wire, one by one. The advantage here is that I can adjust their position as often as I like before gluing everything in place. As soon as I'm satisfied with the position and the spacing, I can very carefully glue the upper chain link in place with a tiny amount of superglue. And now I will repeat that for every single rod. Now I'm gluing the finished curtains underneath the frame. And just like that, I have a functional drone guard surrounding the entire turret. Definitely took some time to cut all these chains to size and then glue them on individually, but I think it was worth it. Above the engine deck I have a larger frame, to which I intend to attach these angled side wire meshes. To do this, I hold the mesh at the desired angle and then use a generous amount of superglue to essentially weld the two pieces together. The frames are now more or less finished. Next I need some Tamiya 2-part component putty. After kneading it thoroughly, I roll it into thin strands. I can now carefully wrap this around the previously attached connectors. Since the surface is smooth, it doesn't adhere very easily. However, a toothpick and a little patience are sufficient to secure it in the end. Using a silicone brush, I can make final adjustments to the shape and position without removing the putty. These will be the weld seams. Somehow they had to attach these things to the vehicle, and the armor strikes me a bit too thick for bolting. So I assume that in the field such add-on armor would simply be welded on from the outside. For the weld seam texture, I'm now using the tool from my Jagdtiger video. I have to do this now for every single connector on the vehicle, and they are quite a few. Next I'm needing another 2-component putty again, but this time it's green stuff from Green Stuff World. I'm kneading the yellow and blue masses until they are a uniform green, though my green stuff has once again started to cure on its own inside the package, which is why there are a few yellow specks. Now I'm rolling the whole thing into a very thin layer. This is an advantage of green stuff, as it remains quite sturdy even when rolled out this thinly. I will cut off a few smaller strips from this now. Using my knife, I can carefully tear and shred one end. This will actually serve as fabric scraps and torn tarps, which I intend to scatter all over the vehicle. Such tarps and sheets are frequently seen on modded combat vehicles, as they can serve, for example, to obscure the silhouette and thereby hinder enemy reconnaissance. I attach these strips random all over the vehicle, wherever I feel they look right. Up here at the front, I'm adding an extra bar, since the whole thing needs to look like it's secured in a somewhat realistic way. From the remaining green stuff, I now form a large flat sheet. I fold a few times and place it on the back of the Guardian. Using a silicone brush, I can press it down neatly and realistically and work in a few additional folds. Now I am pressing this plaster backpack onto it. This comes from my blue stuff tutorial, in case you want to know how I made it. Thanks to the soft green stuff, I can attach the backpack in a realistic manner. And with that, the build is complete. I had been planning on an Ukrainian vehicle featuring improvised drone protection for quite some time. Then I saw photos of an M1117 fully encased in a cage and knew I wanted to try and replicate it. This is likely my most heavily self-modified model to date, and I'm definitely pleased with the results so far. Here I was really able to put my scratch building skills to the test. In any case, I'm really curious to see how the whole thing turns out once it's fully painted, and I hope the cage still stands out just as well. Which part of the modification do you like the best? Please tell me in the comments. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Any feedback or suggestions, let me know in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time.